Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jackie Vandergiff. Jacqueline Jackie Vandergiff was born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas. As the youngest of two daughters, she grew up in the colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by a loving family. From a young age, Jackie exhibited a natural talent for gymnastics. Before she could walk, she was already somersaulting, and her parents recognized her potential at just 3 years old. They enrolled her in gymnastics courses, and over the following years, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. She eventually reached level 5 in the Texas State Gymnastics Association. Those who knew Jackie characterized her as a warm and compassionate person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about the well-being of others and was a loyal friend who inspired her loved ones to be the best versions of themselves. The comfort and joy she brought to those around her were palpable. Her kindness extended beyond human relationships, as she had a deep love for animals, was a lifelong vegetarian, and believed in supporting pet adoption from no-kill shelters. Jackie's passion for reading was unmatched, with the Harry Potter series ranking high on her list of favorites. Immersing herself in the magical world of Hogwarts was a regular escape for her. Besides reading, Jackie had a deep affection for music, boasting an eclectic taste that spanned from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. Her love for musicals was particularly strong, with Rent being a favorite she would attend every local performance of. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie went on to pursue a career in cosmetology at the Paul Mitchell School. She successfully completed her training and earned her license as an esthetician. Not one to rest on her laurels, Jackie opted to further her education at Texas Woman's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. She firmly believed that good nutrition was essential and advocated for everyone's access to proper nourishment. Her ultimate vision was to educate others about the significance of healthy eating, empowering them to make informed choices. Jackie Vandergiff seemed destined for greatness, a college junior on track to achieve her dreams and make a positive impact on the world. However, a chance encounter with an evil person in the summer of 2016 would devastate her life forever. On Wednesday, September 14, 2016, shortly after dawn, a Grapevine Police Department officer in Grapevine, Texas, received a distressing call. The caller reported finding a body near Grapevine Lake. When the officer arrived at the scene, they found a scorched area with a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a badly burned body. The body was charred beyond recognition, making it impossible to determine its identity, age, or gender. The badly burned remains of a body were taken to the medical examiner's office, where fingerprint identification later confirmed that they belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergiff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near the college, where she had visited 2 bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. The autopsy conducted by the medical examiner revealed the shocking extent of Jackie's injuries. She had been killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire. Most disturbingly, her killer had removed her heart. As news of Jackie's brutal murder spread throughout Denton, detectives began receiving tips from people claiming to have seen a suspicious man near the crime scene, where a fire had been set. The detectives eventually obtained CCTV footage from the 2 bars Jackie had visited around the time of her death. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House, where he sat at the bar and had a drink. An hour later, Jackie arrived and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage captured their interaction, providing valuable clues about their possible connection. After spending about 45 minutes at the Fry Street Public House, Jackie posted a tweet at around 8:45 p.m., saying she was glad she decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar. Shortly after, Jackie and the man left the bar together and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they joined a group of women around 9:45 p.m. The pair left Shots and Crafts together. The detectives used CCTV footage to track Jackie and the man she was with, following their journey to the convenience store where the man had parked his car. Jackie was seen getting into the car, and at that point, everything seemed fine. However, this was the last time Jackie was seen alive before her murder. The detectives interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street public house where Jackie had gone to apply for a job. The bartender remembered Jackie having a friendly conversation with him and a male customer, but he had no information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left. The detectives also reviewed security footage from Shots and Crafts, where Jackie was seen with the man and a group of women. One of the women remembered receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. Although this detail seemed insignificant at first, it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the investigation. To their amazement, the woman still had the card in her hand and was more than willing to share the information with the investigators. On the card, they found the name Charles Bryant. By that time, the detectives had already obtained footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., which clearly showed Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then conducted a thorough investigation to uncover the true identity of Charles Bryant, who was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. Their discoveries proved to be deeply unsettling. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived about 20 miles away from Denton, but for some reason, the city held a strong attraction for him. What was drawing him to Denton was a desperate attempt to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who was a resident of Grapevine and a student at the University of North Texas. In May 2016, Caitlin graduated from high school and met Charles Bryant at the restaurant where she worked in Grapevine, Texas. Charles, a personal trainer and bartender in his late 20s, stood out from the boys Caitlin knew from school. His tattoos showcased his muscular build, and Caitlin found his unique skills and mysterious nature intriguing. That summer, Caitlin and Charles spent most days together at Grapevine Lake, and their attraction grew stronger daily. While Caitlin was captivated by Charles, her mother grew concerned about their significant age gap and worried about her daughter's well-being. Caitlin's mother asked to see a picture of Charles, and initially, she was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, when she looked into his piercing eyes, she felt an instant sense of unease. It was as if she was staring directly at evil. As her concern for her daughter's well-being grew, she voiced her worries to Caitlin, urging her to reconsider the relationship. But Caitlin dismissed her mother's warnings, insisting that Charles was nice to her, unaware of the sinister nature lurking beneath his charming facade. At first, Caitlin was happy with her new boyfriend, but as time passed, doubts began to creep in. She started questioning whether her mother had been right. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and manipulative, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. He would constantly remind her that she could never find anyone better than him, making her feel bad about herself. By mid-August 2016, Caitlin was preparing to leave for college in Denton, and she had decided to end her relationship with Charles due to the numerous red flags she had noticed. However, Charles showed up at her home the next day, pleading with her to give him another chance and promising to change. Caitlin was persuaded, and they got back together. Only a week later, Caitlin moved to Denton to start her freshman year at college. After settling in, she finally broke up with Charles for good. Charles, however, refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, the police found Charles on the University of North Texas campus during a traffic stop. They initially suspected him of driving under the influence, but his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, he was arrested on several outstanding warrants and subsequently released. Charles returned to the University of North Texas several hours later and knocked on Caitlin's dorm room door, which he had surprisingly tracked down. When Caitlin answered, she immediately called 911, and by the time the officer arrived, Charles had already disappeared. The officer questioned Caitlin, who explained that she had ended their relationship due to Charles' abusive behavior and the way he spoke to her. As a result, the officer issued Charles a temporary no trespass order, prohibiting him from entering the UNT campus. Despite this, Charles was undeterred and determined to find ways to reach Caitlin, despite the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles coincidentally encountered Caitlin on her first day at a new job. Recognizing him, Caitlin asked Charles to leave. She then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and request that Charles be barred from entering the business premises. However, the manager regretfully informed Caitlin that he lacked the authority to grant her request. This incident ultimately forced Caitlin to quit her job. Despite her best efforts to avoid him, Charles was more determined than ever to confront Caitlin. He was hell-bent on exacting revenge and causing her even more harm. The vicious cycle of fear and intimidation continued, driven by Charles's all-consuming obsession, putting Caitlin's life in constant danger. Meanwhile, Caitlin's decision to stay on campus at the University of North Texas worried her mother sick. Her mother begged her to return home, where they could keep her safe, but Caitlin was adamant that she was safe in her dorm room. She felt secure within the university's walls. On September 6th, a terrifying incident shook Caitlin to her core when Charles suddenly showed up at her dorm on campus. As he pounded on her door, Caitlin's worst fears took over, and she hid in her roommate's closet. From her hiding place, she could hear Charles coaxing her to come out, claiming he had something for her. Her darkest fears began to materialize, and her mind raced with frightening scenarios of what Charles might have planned for her. Caitlin was terrified for her life, so she made a quick decision and called 111 from inside the closet, speaking in a whisper because she was afraid Charles could hear her. The dispatcher asked her to speak up several times, but Caitlin was too scared to talk clearly. No matter how hard the dispatcher tried, Caitlin's voice was barely loud enough to be heard because she was so frightened. The police arrived soon, but Charles had already run away. However, he left a creepy reminder that he had been there, flowers, and a 2-page handwritten letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter had disturbing messages that made the young woman even more afraid. Just a few minutes after the incident, the police caught Charles outside the campus, dressed in exercise clothes, as if he had been jogging. As a student, he was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Despite Caitlin's efforts to cut off all contact with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media, he kept finding new ways to reach her. Charles created multiple accounts to make sure he could still communicate with her. Recognizing that Charles's behavior had become increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin obtain a protective court order. The very next day, she formally filed a petition for the order, which granted her legal protection against further harassment. However, despite his first arrest, Charles continued to attempt to contact Caitlin. These unwanted communications led to his second arrest for stalking, as he repeatedly violated the terms of the protective order. It was his third arrest within 2 weeks of his second arrest. Charles posted a $5,000 bond and was released from custody while out on bail. Charles Bryant went to Fry Street, a location where Caitlin frequently spent time. Although there was only circumstantial evidence, detectives were certain that Charles had met Jackie Vandergiff there, possibly linking him to Jackie's murder. However, no physical evidence existed. When the detectives assisting Caitlin with her stalking case at UNT learned that Charles was the prime suspect in a murder, they grew concerned for Caitlin's safety. Caitlin claimed she was okay, but in the days following Jackie's murder, Charles sent her numerous photos, texts, and emails. On September 18th, the police took Charles into custody for violating Caitlin's protective order. During his incarceration, detectives hoped to uncover more evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder. While being interrogated, Charles was shown a picture of Jackie and claimed to have seen her at the bar, but denied knowing anything about her. Concurrently, a search warrant was executed at Charles's residence. The search yielded a large military-style knife and a Texas Woman's University purse, which was identified as Jackie's school purse. Additionally, the search team found a kiddie pool that had gone missing from Charles's backyard, matching the one where Jackie's body was discovered. The detectives sought the expertise of a seasoned professional who had worked with prolific killers, including the Texas Rangers. This expert was knowledgeable about the mentalities of individuals like Charles, aware that they often have a strong urge to discuss their crimes. When the interview started, Charles claimed to have no memory of Jackie. However, the expert suspected he was hiding something. The expert thought Charles knew more about Jackie's fate than he was letting on. To build trust, the expert created a relaxed atmosphere, making the conversation feel like a casual chat between friends at a bar. The expert suggested possible scenarios, trying to see if Charles would react or take the bait. They portrayed Jackie as the one who had led Charles on, causing frustration. Throughout the conversation, the expert used different tactics to gauge Charles's reactions. However, this approach was risky. If the expert pushed too hard or seemed insincere, they might lose Charles's trust and harm the investigation. So, the expert had to find a balance, staying friendly while trying to get Charles to reveal the truth. During an interview, an expert closely watched Charles's responses and body language to gain insight into his character. The expert pretended to help Charles recall the events surrounding Jackie's admission, but in reality was conducting a brief memory test. To the expert's surprise, Charles' story changed slightly during the test. At first, Charles claimed he knew nothing about Jackie's admission, but later revealed that he had spoken to her at the Fry Street Public House when she applied for a job. As the conversation continued, the expert decided to take a different approach. They ordered pizza, hoping the food would help Charles relax, and the detectives could uncover the motive behind Jackie's murder. The detectives suspected that Charles' uncontrollable rage towards his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, was the catalyst behind Jackie's death. The interrogation lasted around 3 hours, during which Charles admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. He claimed the incident occurred in his car, and Jackie had asked him to choke her with an oversized zip tie he had. However, Charles maintained that the death was an accident. When Charles Bryant was accused of murdering Jackie Vandergiff, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media to look at Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover they were already friends. It suddenly came to Caitlin's mind that she had received a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the very day Jackie's body was found. Before Caitlin was even aware of the case, she was convinced that her ex-boyfriend, Charlie, who was the suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Additionally, the police also believed that a tweet sent from Jackie's account after her death, which read, "Never knew I could feel like this," was actually sent by Charles after he murdered her. Christy was shocked when she learned that Charles, a man she had met on a dating app a year earlier, was facing a murder charge. To her, Charles was a quiet and reserved person. But during their brief time together, she noticed some disturbing signs that raised her concerns. Christy said that Charles quickly became clingy and attached to her, which eventually led her to end their relationship. But Charles persisted in pursuing her, going so far as to profess his desperate love for her. This declaration caught Christy off guard, especially since they had never even shared a kiss. Christy's experience working with abused children gave her a unique insight that helped her identify certain patterns in Charles's behavior. This led her to suspect that he might have been a victim of childhood abuse, a pattern she had seen in some of the young clients she worked with. One day, Christy found the courage to ask Charles directly if he had been abused as a child. To her surprise, Charles confessed that he had indeed suffered trauma in his childhood. Although the police couldn't verify Charles's claims, Christy believed him. She maintained contact with him, albeit from a distance, because she felt sympathy for him and didn't think he was capable of murder. The autopsy of Jackie's body failed to provide clear answers about her cause of death and where she was killed before being dismembered and set on fire. The lack of insight from the autopsy results raised concerns for the prosecution, leaving key questions unanswered about the circumstances surrounding Jackie's death. Charles admitted to disposing of Jackie's body, claiming she had died accidentally during rough intercourse. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty to her murder. Caitlin, Charles's ex-girlfriend, was called to testify by the prosecution to share her experiences with his stalking behavior and violent tendencies. The goal was to establish a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and the eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin. When Caitlin took the stand, she was visibly uncomfortable and reluctantly identified Charles, commenting that he had a smirk. Overcome with emotion, she left the courtroom in tears. The judge ultimately ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details of her relationship with Charles or their breakup with the jury. In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie's tragic death, Charles Bryant went on trial for her murder. However, Jackie's best friend was too traumatized to attend the trial, finding it unbearable to face Charles in person. The thought of confronting him was a painful reminder of the devastation he had caused to their lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Victor Alexander Puderol. After Victor Alexander Puderol committed the heinous crime, he carelessly went to his girlfriend Rina's father's house. Ostensibly, he was there to retrieve forgotten children's clothes. While at the home, he took a tablet belonging to one of the victimized girls and pawned it at a nearby shop, receiving about 500 pesos. The next day, he spent the equivalent of $10 while vacationing on the beach with his best friend, Crystal. During this outing, he confessed that he had done something bad to his lover, but provided no specific details. Crystal later indicated that Victor's tone, words, and expressions conveyed the seriousness of what occurred. Allegedly, she even tried to visit Rina's house to check if everything was all right with her and her children. However, Victor refused the visit, citing disorder and a difficult emotional atmosphere in the family. That was enough for Crystal to feel she had done her best in the situation. She chose not to go to the police. Concerned neighbors contacted law enforcement when they could no longer ignore or explain away a strong smell of decomposition emanating from Rina and Victor's home. The pungent odor was undoubtedly coming from their recently moved-in home, where flies were clustering at the windows. Because Rina and Victor had only recently moved into the neighborhood and had not established connections with neighbors, nobody had their phone numbers or any other means of contacting them. Notably, no one had seen Rina, Victor, or the children for several days. Unable to contact the homeowners and alarmed by the smell, worried neighbors called emergency services. A few hours after receiving the call, law enforcement officers picked the door lock and entered the home. Inside, they encountered a truly horrifying sight. 4 lifeless bodies, Rina and her children, were found. Rina's daughters lay in a room next to their mother, while her son was found hanging from a rung in a closet. The circumstances remain unclear. The media was on the scene right away, and before long, detectives had identified the man living with Rina. Reports containing shocking details of the family's death quickly went live on a major metropolitan TV channel. Victor Alexander Puderol, while at work in his workshop, learned that the police had broken into his house and found the bodies of 4 victims. In messages to Miguel Urena Marino, Victor shared contacts for Rina's relatives and asked him to pass them on to the police. He explained that he only trusted Miguel and deeply regretted what had happened. He also asked Miguel to convey his last wish, that he wanted a large motorcycle escort at his funeral from the biker club. His final message to Miguel read, "Now I don't believe anyone. Everyone wants to save me, but it's not going to happen. I'm leaving this damned world. I don't care what happens. I'm leaving. See you later." Miguel Arena contacted the police immediately, sharing everything and adding that Victor had reportedly taken his own life. Law enforcement officers tracked Victor's cell phone location and went to the scene. Victor Alexander Putol had not harmed himself and hadn't even thought about it. There was no remorse or guilt for what had occurred. The man knew he would be caught and had planned his arrest to ensure it was as safe for him as possible. Gathering his essential items in a backpack, he headed to a small park not far from the workshop. Victor sat pensively on a sidewalk near the park for a while until a passerby approached and asked if he needed help. Shaking his head from side to side, he replied that he was fine, stood up, walked into the park, and lay down on the grass, his hands behind his head as he gazed serenely at the sky. He lay there for almost an hour until around 8 a.m. when a national police van arrived. Victor did not move or resist arrest. The process took less than 5 minutes. Rina Isabel Encarnacion was born in 1985 in the Dominican Republic. Not long after her birth, her parents chose to separate. Her father left the family, yet he continued to support his ex-wife and daughter. Subsequently, Rina's mother met another man, and soon the girl had a stepfather who basically became another father to her. Rina formed a strong bond with her mother's new husband while maintaining a warm relationship with her biological father. Both men treated her with warmth and care. Growing up, Rina was an inquisitive and active child. She loved learning and enjoyed going to school. Her father's house was nearby, so she often saw him. It seemed that this intelligent and cheerful girl had a bright future ahead of her. After successfully completing school, Rina entered university to pursue higher education in commercial law. At the same time, she applied to the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo with hopes of obtaining a second degree in medicine. Unfortunately, she was not accepted and had to postpone this dream until the following year. When Rina turned 20, she met Daniel Bowden, a man much older than herself. Despite their significant age difference, there was an undeniable romantic attraction between them. A few months into their relationship, Rina became pregnant, and soon after, the couple married. From this union came 3 children, Daniela Arak Menina and Angela. Due to her new responsibilities as a mother, Rina had to give up her dream of obtaining a second higher education degree. Initially, their marriage seemed ideal. However, over time, their age difference began to strain the relationship, leading to frequent quarrels. Understanding that constant conflicts were harmful to their children, Daniel decided it was best for them to separate after 8 years together. A lengthy legal battle ensued over child custody. Family court specialists intervened when both parties struggled to reach an agreement on their own. They decided on conducting psychological evaluations to ascertain the children's preferences regarding their living arrangements. The experts concluded that custody should be awarded to the father, considering his age, financial stability, and taking into account the opinions of the older children. Despite the recommendations from experts, the judge presiding over the case disregarded their and awarded custody of the older children to Rina. Angela, the youngest daughter, was placed under the care of one of Daniel's sisters. Tragically, this decision not only took away their future, but also affected their lives. Subsequent years proved that the judge should have paid more attention to expert advice. Rina's interests seemed to be more focused on alimony than on the welfare of her children. After obtaining custody of her older children, she promptly handed them over to her mother, believing it was the best solution for everyone. She then initiated a new legal battle over alimony payments. Rina contended that her ex-husband had failed to pay any of the court-ordered alimony. Daniel, however, argued that he had met all his obligations but could not provide proof, alleging that these payments were made in cash. This legal dispute lasted several months and concluded in favor of Rina, with Daniel having to make another alimony payment. During this second legal proceeding, an important development occurred. Rina's mother testified on behalf of her former son-in-law, Daniel. She maintained that Daniel was a commendable father who deserved better treatment, emphasizing that he and her daughter had shared 8 beautiful years together. she attested to his responsibility and dedication as both a husband and father. It's important to note that Rina did not completely neglect her children. She visited them almost daily at their grandmother's residence and often took them home on weekends. However, during most other times, she appeared to focus on enjoying life to its fullest. At one of these social gatherings, she met Victor Alexander Putor. Victor was 2 years younger than Rina and had an intriguing presence. He was mystically minded with long black hair and glowing white contact lenses, and a biker as well as a metalhead. Despite these traits making quite an impression initially, he also exhibited qualities less desirable: dirty and unkempt appearance alongside an introverted and insecure personality. Yet these quirks did not deter Rina. Soon enough, they moved in together. While some might have raised eyebrows at this union, even Rina's mother welcomed Victor into the family circle after hearing numerous stories about his difficult upbringing involving a strict father due to his mother's absence. Victor was born in 1987 and spent his early years with his father. The nature of their relationship is unclear, but it's evident that Victor learned to adapt to various circumstances, even those that were uncomfortable. While his appearance set him apart, no one in his surroundings considered him odd. From a young age, Victor avoided conflicts. He excelled academically and graduated with honors. However, financial constraints prevented him from attending university. As a result, he sought employment and soon secured an internship at a motorcycle repair shop. This experience ignited his passion for motorcycles. Over time, Victor purchased a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and became part of the motorcycling community. Despite leading a quiet and law-abiding life without even a parking ticket on his record, his appearance, including black clothing, eye makeup, painted nails, and occasionally white contact lenses, instilled fear in those around him. Rarely did he control, but there were moments when his darker side emerged. One neighbor recalled an incident where Victor caught a neighbor's chicken, slit its throat, and drank the blood directly from the wound. Victor and Rina took care of the children during weekends and sometimes on weekdays, giving the grandparents relief from their 3 noisy grandchildren. They observed that Rina's new partner was kind and attentive to the children. Moreover, Rina never complained about Victor, and they never seemed to quarrel, a fact that pleased her parents greatly. However, there was one unsettling piece of information. Victor had a 10-year-old daughter with a restraining order preventing him from approaching her. Rina's parents couldn't comprehend why the girl's mother would take such action. In an attempt to understand more about Victor, Rina's stepfather discreetly followed him on several occasions, but found nothing incriminating or unusual. Victor abstained from alcohol and illegal substances and was consistently either at home or at work, repairing motorcycles. He never behaved rudely towards the children, even when alone with them. In other words, despite any suspicions, he appeared to be a normal person. Rina's parents dismissed the restraining order as her birth mother's eccentricity and quickly settled down. The situation changed when the aunt, who had been caring for the youngest Angela, informed Rina that she couldn't continue looking after the girl. Around this time, Rina's mother began having health issues. Consequently, the grandchildren had to move from their grandmother's house to live with Rina and Victor. Suddenly, all 5 of them were crammed into a small apartment. However, favorable circumstances soon emerged. Rina was offered a new job with a higher salary. The reunited family then moved into a spacious rented house with several separate rooms. Their life seemed idyllic: spacious home, loving partners, and children with their mother. This appeared as a sign that everything was going well. But perhaps it wasn't entirely true. Rina soon lost her job, leading to financial troubles for the family. According to Victor's mother, she even had to provide financial assistance to the young couple because they lacked sufficient money for basics such as food and rent. Meanwhile, Rina's mother remained unaware of her daughter's struggles. On rare occasions, when Rina brought the children over to her mother's house, she would ask her to feed them well, a request her grandmother happily obliged. In addition to these financial problems, Something strange and clearly unhealthy began happening in their relationship. Although Rina never complained to anyone about their circumstances or their relationship being far from normal, troubling signs surfaced shortly before tragic events unfolded. Victor appeared on the street one day with short cropped hair. It turned out that he and Rina had a severe argument the previous night, during which Rina cut off his long black hair while he slept as an act of revenge. Additionally, Victor admitted that Rina threatened to leave him with the kids if he didn't secure a good-paying job within a month. On Saturday, February 3, 2018, Rina her mother's house to pick her children, who had staying with their grandmother since Thursday. Rina's mother didn't notice anything unusual about her daughter's behavior. In fact, she was sociable and exhibited a normal mood. They even had the chance to chat over a cup of tea while the children packed their belongings. The next day, early Sunday morning, February 4th, Rina and her mother had a brief telephone conversation where they discussed current affairs and agreed to call each other later. Rina never contacted again after that. Despite numerous attempts to reach her through calls and many text messages sent to both her daughter and grandchildren, there was no response. The concerned woman called Victor as well, but he did not answer either. This silence and ignoring of calls continued for several days. Finally, on Wednesday, February 7th, Victor answered a call. He assured Rina's mother that everything was in order and promised that Rina would call back soon to explain everything in detail. He asked her not to worry and to wait for the call. However, the daughter never called back. It became clear to the parents that something terrible had happened. A day later, they received a call from law enforcement officers who informed Rina's parents of the horrifying details of what had transpired. Following his arrest, Victor Alexander immediately began to testify without hiding anything or expecting leniency. According to his account, he initially wanted to end his life, but then changed his mind, believing he should pay for what he had done. Thanks to his detailed testimony, authorities were able to almost completely reconstruct the sequence of events. On the morning of Sunday, February 4th, the two roommates had another significant argument in their shared bedroom. During this altercation, Victor struck Rina several times on her neck, chest, and stomach, which resulted in her death. He then locked her body in the room and asked Daniela, Rina's oldest child, to go to the store and buy him a pack of cigarettes. While Daniela was gone, Victor went into the children's room and strangled Rina's daughter with a necktie as she slept. When Daniela returned from the store, he did the same thing to her as he had done to her sister. Afterward, and tragically, he moved both children's bodies into the bedroom alongside their mothers. Back then, Rina shared that young Aramon was playing quietly in the courtyard behind the house. Victor approached the boy and explained that his older sister had gone to the store and was running late. He told him he'd take him to their aunt's house and then go look for Daniela. Aramon obediently followed Victor to Aunt Johanna Mendoza Coelho's house. Having left the boy there, Victor returned home with the intention of hiding the consequences of his actions. It appears he only realized upon returning that concealing the truth was impossible, and it would eventually come out. A few hours later, he retrieved Aramon and informed his aunt that Daniela had been found and it was time to go home. At home, Victor took Aramon's life by hanging him from a rung inside a closet. Victor claimed he committed this crime due to the difficult financial situation they were in, which he felt psychologically unable to cope with. Acquaintances confirmed that recently he had complained about family disagreements over money. Victor's mother informed investigators that financial difficulties had driven her son into despair, pushing him to commit such a grave act. The couple was already in a critical state, and their problem worsened over the weekend when they didn't get their expected paycheck. I believe it was this situation, my son being a young man, being pressured for money by a woman and her children, that pushed him over the edge, said Mrs. Joanna Mendoza, aunt of the accused. However, the extreme brutality of the crime didn't align with pure mental illness. The preliminary autopsy report clarified things further. all female victims weren't just deprived of life, but also abused. An investigation by the public prosecutor's office revealed that victim Rina Isabel Encarna had frequently raised concerns via WhatsApp with the accused about inappropriate intimate acts towards Angela while she slept. In recent messages, Rina threatened her cohabitant with going to law enforcement if things didn't change. Rina's mother told police that although the detained young man had always treated the three girls well, he had a particularly special relationship with Angela. He frequently carried her in his arms, placed her on his lap, and often hugged and kissed her. He even gave her a special nickname, Señorita. Investigators believed that Victor had ended the lives of his family members not due to financial problems, but to conceal the wrongful acts committed against Angela. Forensic results confirmed that Rina, as well as the two girls, had been wrongfully abused. Nonetheless, experts couldn't determine whether these acts were committed before or after their deaths, as the bodies were in an advanced stage of decomposition. A psychiatric examination revealed that Victor suffers from antisocial personality disorder. This means he lacks both guilt and conscience. The heinous crime deeply outraged and shocked the entire Dominican society. The trial began in January 2019 and wrapped up in just 2 days. Testimony was provided by experts, forensic specialists, investigators, and various witnesses. A lot of information came from Victor's friends. Crystal, his best friend, mentioned that on the day of his arrest, he handed over all his social media passwords and his mother's phone number to her. To Crystal, it seemed like Victor was planning to end his life. Another friend stated that Victor confessed the crime to him in detail a few days before his arrest, but it was so horrifying that this friend took it as a joke initially. In general, everyone who had ever met or seen the accused was stunned by his actions, including neighbors, teachers, and co-workers. Victor's only childhood diagnosis was attention deficit disorder, ADD. However, according to his mother, this condition didn't cause any problems for either him or their family. 18 witnesses in total testified during the trial, including 2 forensic experts. At the trial, the latter provided such shocking details that even Victor's mother asked for the full weight of the law to fall on her son. She firmly stated, "Justice must be served. He must pay for everything he has done." In court, she pleaded with Rina's family to forgive her for such a son, and shared in their grief. Victor Alexander Futrell admitted guilt to taking the lives of Rina Isabel Encarnacion and her 3 children. He also offered an apology to the victim's family and the public for his crime. The man received the harshest sentence available within the Dominican Republic's judicial system at that time, 30 years. When sentenced, he was just 30 years old, meaning he could potentially leave prison and live out his remaining years in freedom under fortunate circumstances. This things prompted the National Congress to expedite updates to the criminal code. The country's legal system, established in 1844, does not include cumulative punishment for multiple crimes. Had the updated criminal code been in effect, Victor Alexander could have faced a sentence of up to 60 years for his crime. The shocking deaths of Rina and her children underscored the urgent need to update this law. Nonetheless, it can be said that justice prevailed as the perpetrator received the maximum sentence possible at that time. Rina's mother expressed satisfaction with the outcome of the case during various television programs. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Andrea Lohaugen. Andrea Lohaugen, born on January 6, 1977, in Bad Big, grew up in a close-knit family in a new residential complex. Known for her obedience and excellence in studies from a young age, she became a source of pride for her parents. By the age of 16, Andrea had blossomed into a beautiful school star with many admirers. Apart from studying and attending parties, the girls did not engage in anything reprehensible. On October 7, 1993, the day before the end of 16-year-old Andrea's autumn break, she was out shopping with her parents near their home. She was nearing the end of her high school journey, looking ahead to her final year, exams, and the transition into adult life. Andrea dreamt of going to university, building a career, and starting a family. With just one more year of schooling left, the future looked bright. One day, Andrea was supposed to return from the club around 10 p.m. to make it in time for watching another horror movie, which she was accustomed to watching in the evenings with her mother. However, at the appointed hour, the beauty did not show up at home. Initially, it was assumed that Andrea would be delayed for a couple of hours with friends and then return as usual. But her friends at the party never saw the girl, which greatly alarmed them. Such an uncharacteristic delay for responsible Andrea did not align with her usual punctual behavior. She had never allowed herself to be late before. The next day, when Andrea didn't show up at school, her parents got really worried. They decided to search for her, asking the father to help. At 1:30 a.m., they set off in their car to look for Andrea. Despite searching for hours in Bad Belzig and checking the youth center, they couldn't find any leads. When they went to the youth center, Andrea's friends couldn't say if she had left for the club or gone back home. By around 4 a.m., the parents went to the local police to report Andrea's disappearance. Unfortunately, the police were hesitant to start searching for her immediately. They believed she had just gone out and would come home the next morning. But Andrea's parents were sure something terrible had happened to her. They knew she wouldn't run away or not come home on her own, especially as all her belongings were still at home. The police only started investigating a week later when Andrea still hadn't returned. Up until then, her parents had been searching everywhere in town. They even checked with all the hospitals in the area, but didn't find any news about a girl who looked like Andrea. Andrea was last seen before her disappearance. Her parents suspected her ex-boyfriend, thinking he might have something to do with it. The police decided to investigate the lead provided by the parents, and after questioning witnesses from the youth club where Andrea was supposed to go, it was revealed that she never showed up at the club. Her friends, who were waiting for her, confirmed her absence. The club underwent thorough searches by patrols, search and rescue teams with trained dogs, and numerous volunteers, but Andrea's whereabouts remained unknown. Public appeals were made for information, cautioning against potential dangers. Despite exhaustive efforts including press conferences, TV broadcasts, and investigation, no substantial leads emerged. Investigators managed to reconstruct events leading up to Andrea's disappearance on October 7, 1993. Speculations arose about the possibility of sexual assault due to Andrea's appearance. Detectives scrutinized her acquaintances, listing ex-boyfriends and admirers in search of clues. After a thorough investigation, it was found that all potential suspects had solid alibis. Many young men at the party couldn't have been involved in the attack. However, the surveillance system was still in its early stages, which made the investigation more complicated. Detectives then searched for possible witnesses to the incident. They found that Andrea took a shorter route to the club that evening, and several witnesses saw her. These witnesses mentioned that she passed by a group of young people and later by a couple of teenagers whom she did not know well. Andrea continued on her way, and the last people to see her alive were two boys, aged 13 and 14, named Robin and David. According to German law, their identities and photos could not be revealed. The detectives found these teenagers and took their statements. It turned out they just nodded to the girl and went their separate ways. After that, Andrea seemed to vanish without a trace. The police concentrated on Robin and David, the last people known to have seen Andrea alive. Growing up near the Hogan family's home and coming from troubled families, the teens were familiar with the side path Andrea took. It was a common route for them, despite their young age. Despite the boys having a history of minor thefts and break-ins, there was insufficient evidence to charge them with serious crimes like assault and abduction. Eventually, all suspicions against them were cleared because they were minors, and the case reached a standstill. For the next 7 years, the situation remained unresolved. On July 7, 2000, a local resident discovered a human skull while walking his dog. Initially mistaking it for a ball, he later realized it was a genuine human skull, long devoid of flesh and with a hole pierced through the occipital bone. The resident reported the find to the police. Detectives found a complete human skeleton buried on the former boyfriend's property, identified as Andrea Lohagen. Despite the absence of her clothing, forensic examination, including dental records, confirmed the remains belonged to Andrea, who had been missing for 7 years. The tragic truth was uncovered next to the youth center where Andrea was heading. On that evening, her remains were discovered by the investigation, revealing the grim truth about the girl's fate. Relatives were able to give her a proper burial. However, questions arose about the thoroughness of the initial searches. The body had been hidden right under their noses all these years. Reviewing the search operation reports showed that the area, including the abandoned shed with piles of debris, had been inspected by investigators before. Nothing suspicious was found inside. It's possible that the victim's body was hidden there much later, although there was no documentary evidence to confirm this. Detectives recalled testimonies of witnesses who mentioned the last time Andrea was seen was with 2 teenagers aged 13 and 14, Robin and David. Soon after meeting them, the girl disappeared without a trace, raising suspicions in the investigation. During the initial inquiry, the boys were interrogated again and claimed they had only greeted Andrea that fateful night and had no connection to her disappearance. Unfortunately, no evidence or traces linking the suspects to the victim were found during the inspection of the shed and the forensic examination. Despite this, all signs pointed to the boys, and their involvement couldn't be completely ruled out. Upon closer examination, it was found that these teenagers had a definite link to the spot where Andrea's body was discovered. People frequently saw Robin and David close to the shed. It was also uncovered that the boys could enter the inside of the vacant building. Witnesses stated that on the night the girl went missing, the teenagers were spotted at the entrance of the shed. This raised new questions and intensified suspicions of their involvement in the crime. Despite the link to the crime scene, authorities couldn't ignore the connection of the teenagers, Robin and David, to the crime scene. The investigation into their involvement ceased at that time. The primary argument was the lack of sufficient evidence and the young age of the potential suspects. This led the detectives to not believe in the schoolboys' involvement in the murder. In 2012, new leadership in the regional police department renewed interest in Andrea Lohagen's cold case. During the reopened investigation, detectives uncovered some new evidence and leads, but there was still not enough proof to charge a specific individual. There was no prime suspect in sight. The situation changed dramatically in May 2016 when 37-year-old David passed away in Berlin. He was one of the teenagers who had last seen Andrea alive. David's cause of death was serious pancreatic problems due to drug addiction and an antisocial lifestyle. During one of his train trips, David suffered a fatal internal hemorrhage. Even though the death certificate listed natural causes, he had a long criminal history. A witness came forward to law enforcement claiming to solve Andrea Lohagen's murder case, revealing details only they knew. This witness turned out to be David's mother, who confessed to keeping a terrible secret about her son's involvement in the brutal murder of the local beauty. One October evening in 1993, David and his friend Robin were walking along a path when they encountered Andrea. Noticing her fashionable attire, the delinquent youth decided to attack and rob the 16-year-old girl in the darkness. Robin was immediately brought in for questioning. By that time, his former accomplice was no longer alive, so the police had to rely solely on the words of the surviving criminal. Robin, relieved, confessed to everything, recounting the gruesome details. He expressed a desire to first speak with his family, confess to them, and only then provide final testimony to the investigation. Appreciating the testimony of the key witness, the detectives agreed to give Robin 48 hours to meet with his family. They had no inkling that the 36-year-old man had already made up his mind. Upon returning to his apartment, where his wife was temporarily absent, Robin left a final message for his wife and a note for the police detailing the attack on Andrea Lohagen. Then he disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, with Robin failing to show up, he was declared missing. On November 4, 2016, the body of the sought-after man was discovered by one of the hunters in the mountains. The mutilated body of the 36-year-old man lay at the bottom of a deep ravine. Robin had voluntarily ended his life, apparently unable to bear the burden of guilt for the crime he committed in his youth. In his final note, Robin described the horrifying details of that senseless crime, admitting he himself never understood the true motives of his friend David. David initiated the attack without explaining to his friend why he suddenly decided to assault a girl. Robin detailed the incident, noting that the killer confessed to not knowing the victim, Andrea Lohagen, before the attack. The assault was a sudden outburst of aggression as the teenagers crossed paths with Andrea on her way to a party. After exchanging greetings, David unexpectedly attacked the girl. The teenagers then buried her body in an outbuilding before fleeing. There was no apparent motive for the attack, described as senseless cruelty. Robin revealed their past involvement with drug dealers and drug use that night. Peter Lemon, head of the youth center Andrea frequented, was shocked by the violence. He cooperated with the investigation, recalling the victim as a well-behaved regular at the establishment. Lemon was aware of rumors about 2 teenagers near the scene, but never suspected them capable of such a crime. These individuals had been free for 20 years after committing murder. The investigation did not have any direct evidence like DNA or fingerprints to link the suspects to the crime. Detectives looked into Robin's social media activity and device content for any signs of involvement in the crime. Suspicious posts suggesting David's connection to Andrea's disappearance were found on his accounts, indicating he might have known about the investigation. David's mother believed his death was fate, as she was worried about his criminal past and involvement with the police. The violent content on David's social media raised concerns about his capability for cruelty at a young age. There were concerns about a possible third adult accomplice in Andrea's murder, possibly an elder mentor guiding the young boys. Andrea's death was caused by a severe head injury, indicating the need for significant physical strength. The detectives were skeptical that 2 teenagers of that age could have used enough force to overpower an older girl and cause such a serious injury. The idea of an adult accomplice was indirectly supported by other details uncovered during the investigation. At that time, a new potential suspect emerged for the detectives. It was a man closely associated with Robin and David's company and significantly older than them. However, the investigators didn't disclose this man's name, neither in the pre-death note nor in Robin's testimony. Moreover, David's mother denied the possibility of a third accomplice. Despite this, some indirect witness testimonies pointed to the involvement of an outsider adult. For instance, witnesses described a truck driver of approximately the same age whom they saw near the shed around the time Andrea disappeared. The identity of this person was established, and the investigators directly linked him to the incident surrounding the girl's disappearance. In reality, all 3 teenagers, Andrea, Robin, and David, attended the same school. However, due to the age difference, they didn't cross paths in the same classes, nor did they have common activities or friends. It couldn't be ruled out that there were previous conflicts between Andrea and the juvenile delinquents living nearby, perhaps fueling the embittered teenagers' hateful feelings towards the girl. Both boys grew up in troubled families, which led to early exposure to alcohol and illicit substances. It's possible that on that fateful night, they were also under the influence of intoxicating substances, heightening their unrestrained aggressiveness. One striking detail was that Andrea's remains were discovered on a plot belonging to a relative of one of the killers, the grandfather of the victim's former boyfriend. Some considered this too specific a coincidence and speculated on the involvement of the ex-boyfriend in the incident. The public expressed strong disapproval when the truth about the teenager's role in the murder was revealed. People were upset that in the 1990s, detectives had stopped the investigation because the potential suspects were young in the small town of Bad Big, where everyone knew each other. Previously, school children were suspected of being involved in Andrea's disappearance due to rumors and dissatisfaction from neighbors. David's family had to move away after the tragedy. If the detectives had continued focusing on the teenagers back then, the victim's body would have been discovered much sooner, allowing for a prompt evaluation of their crime and holding the young killers accountable in a timely manner. Post-mortem results showed a fracture in Andrea's skull, but the specific object used to cause the injury couldn't be identified. The investigation only had the small bones of the decomposed skeleton to rely on. With no direct physical evidence, they had to depend on David's mother's testimonies and Robin's notes. When the investigation was reopened, a crucial question arose. Did these juvenile criminals commit any new crimes while free over the last 20-plus years? It seemed unlikely, but the chance couldn't be discounted. Local residents couldn't recall any new serious incidents involving them, but David and Robin had a history of minor criminal activities that detectives thoroughly investigated. This scrutiny revealed dark secrets of the teenage group. By the time suspicions emerged about Robin's involvement in a new serious incident, the detectives learned of the horrifying events on January 11, 2014. A French exchange student named Louise went missing after meeting friends at the university hospital. Just before leaving home, she had a phone conversation with a friend to plan their meetup. However, Louise never arrived at the agreed location. Her friends tried to contact her, but she didn't answer her phone. They assumed she must have had urgent matters and went home. The next day, Louise didn't show up for work without any explanation, which was unusual for her because she was known to be very responsible. Her phone was unreachable in the evening, and her whereabouts were unknown. Later, Louise's body was found. The main suspect in her murder turned out to be Robin, the same juvenile killer who had taken his own life just as the police were reopening his old case. The coincidence was truly ominous. It was revealed that Louise personally knew Robin. The French girl had no idea about the dangerous person she had gotten involved with, and sadly, she paid with her life, likely becoming the second victim of the ruthless criminal. However, just like in Andrea's case, proving Robin's involvement in Louise's murder was extremely challenging because the investigation lacked sufficient direct evidence. The case of the French student's murder officially remained unsolved. Many believed that the root of evil lay in the negligence of the law enforcement officers who had halted the investigation into the involvement of the two juvenile teenagers in Andrea's murder back in 1993 due to their underage status. This negligence allowed future criminals to commit new crimes with a high degree of probability. Robin did kill Louise, as his criminal past had been neglected, leading to unsuccessful searches with the case gathering dust on distant archival shelves. Andrea's body had decomposed in plain sight, and years later, Louise met a similar fate, a life that could have been saved so easily. The Lohagan family believes that the juvenile killers did not receive their deserved punishment for their crimes, as they lived freely for a significant period before their deaths. During that time, nothing prevented them from leading normal lives, carrying out simple everyday tasks, the very joys that innocent Andrea was cruelly deprived of. The exact motives for her murder, like many other details of that ancient tragedy, remain shrouded in mystery to this day, behind the 7 locks of unproven facts and silence. This case underscores how dangerous it is to underestimate the criminal potential even of the youngest suspects, and the negligence of the investigation that disregarded leads solely because of Robin and David's minority. In 1993, 2 juvenile killers were able to nurture their violent tendencies and avoid facing justice for several years. The extreme cruelty demonstrated by these teenagers during the random murder of Andrea, a passerby, continues to shock people. Even some adult criminals are incapable of such senseless and inhumane aggression, yet the culprits turned out to be immature youths. It is chilling to think about what Robin and David could have become if their criminal activities had not been stopped. The belated revelation of the truth about Andrea's murder highlights the importance of solving crimes before it's too late, as eventually the truth will emerge. However, restoring justice may prove impossible by that time. Andrea's tragic story reminds us of the value of every human life. All that remains is to show sympathy and support for Andrea's grieving family. Unfortunately, justice was never fully served as Robin and David never faced a clear legal judgment, having taken their own lives. Their actions make us realize the horrors even a young person is capable of when stepping onto the destructive path of crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dave Krupa. If Dave Krupa had known how his online dating would turn out, he would never have registered on a dating site. He would have continued to live his old life with his girlfriend Amy Flora and their 2 children together. Maybe finally, he would have legalized the 12-year relationship after all, especially since after the breakup, Amy and Dave remained good friends. Periodically, they spent vacations together with their children, fulfilling their parenting duties to perfection. That was in 2011, and by the summer of 2012, Dave was ready to start a new relationship. He wanted to get acquainted with women who would not mind a free relationship and did not make far-reaching plans. With such thoughts, he came to the dating site, a place where everyone is looking for something different. About Carrie Farver, she was born on November 30th, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. Having a failed experience of previous relationships, she alone raised her son, Max Maxwell. At one time, the child was a reward as well as a challenge for her. Despite her great love for the baby, she once spent a month in bed going into a deep depression. The child's care was provided by Carrie's mother, Nancy Rainey. Difficult relations with the father of the child, unsettled living conditions, served as a reason for the appearance of a young 20-year-old woman. Such an acute psychological state, doctors later diagnosed Farver with bipolar disorder. Individuals with this diagnosis often exhibit contrasting behaviors. Their mood fluctuates between manic states, characterized by euphoria, heightened productivity, and excessive sociability, and depressive states marked by despondency, resentment, and diminished function. This condition significantly disrupts their normal daily life. However, in the early 2000s, Carrie's physician was able to provide an effective treatment, allowing her to live a more typical lifestyle. Whether she wanted to settle her personal life is a rhetorical question. On the one hand, absolutely, what woman does not dream of a worthy companion? On the other hand, why tie yourself to someone who may later become the cause of many worries and misfortunes? Carrie grew up in a loving and full family. She had an active lifestyle, engaged in sports, and dreamed of pursuing a career in medicine. However, these dreams were not meant to be. During her first practical session at the medical college, she fainted at the sight of blood. Consequently, she decided not to risk her own health nor the health of potential patients. Instead, she studied to become a programmer. In the fall of 2012, in the neighboring city of Omaha, Carrie was offered a job on good terms. She couldn't turn down the prospects that lay ahead of her, so she accepted the offer. Since Max was in middle school, the boy did not want to change his familiar surroundings and move with his mother. He remained to reside with his grandmother in Macedonia. Carrie Farver's friend Amy long recalled that she couldn't help but be noticed when she walked into a room. All eyes were on her and her radiant smile. Perhaps that's what Dave Krupa liked about her. One November day in 2012, Carrie met Dave at the auto repair shop where he worked. While looking at Carrie's car, a Ford Explorer, he realized he was very attracted to this woman. "She's showing me something inside the car, and we were standing there, and there was some tension," Dave later recalled. It didn't take long for the date to arrive, and it was afterward that they went up to Dave's house. except that their privacy was marred by many calls and messages from a certain Liz, who later stopped by the man's apartment to pick up something left for her earlier. Dave explained to Carrie that this was his former companion, Liz Gore, whom he met on a dating site about 6 months ago and had been dating for a while. He also mentioned that the woman was overly attached, which led to their separation. Carrie was very understanding, so she was not bewildered when she saw another woman in the man's residence. After all, everyone has their own emotional baggage from the past that occasionally resurfaces, so Carrie remained unperturbed. However, Liz was evidently distressed to see an unfamiliar woman in Dave's home just 2 weeks after moving in. Carrie began dating Dave, and they had discussed their relationship with each other beforehand, agreeing only to a brief, unencumbered affair. Elizabeth Guler, better known as Liz, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Liz was born in 1975 in Michigan. Dave initially liked her, but she claimed that she was also not looking for a serious relationship, especially since she was a mother and most of her time should be spent on her children, not men. They both had children around the same age. Dave repeatedly noted that Liz was unlikely to be a real-life partner for him since she was neither well-read nor educated, which was important in a relationship between a man and a woman. They had few topics of conversation, and the relationship emphasized more on the horizontal over time. Liz became curious about Dave's activities and social interactions while she was away. Dave repeatedly emphasized that they were in an open relationship and she should not worry about his actions. Dave also told Liz that she was free to date other men, as he did not restrict her. However, Liz was not satisfied with this and continued to pester Dave. Liz's main source of jealousy was Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the cordial relationship that remained between them after their breakup. Eventually, Liz's actions forced Dave to distance himself. Then Carrie appeared on the horizon. Carrie was beautiful with style and intelligence, and Dave could talk to her for hours. They matched on everything, and Dave felt like he had hit the jackpot. Liz, sensing the man was distancing himself from her, tried to reassert her presence by being more active. She wrote messages, emails, and called him. However, he wasn't willing to stop seeing Carrie or anyone else for her. Soon, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together. Dave allowed this because it was convenient for Carrie to get to work, and he enjoyed her company. Carrie acted like she was not looking for something serious, but was just enjoying the moment, having fun. In December 2015, Liz was shot. The woman, in all likelihood, guessed who it was. As luck would have it, the wound turned out to be non-fatal. Leaving for work on November 13, 2012, Carrie kissed Dave and promised to see him later. That was the last time he would see her. At 9:45 a.m. while at work, Dave was very surprised by the contents of a text message from Carrie. She texted him that she wanted to live with him and move in with him permanently. The correspondence was very disconcerting to Dave. He could not understand Carrie's sudden change of mood, as they had discussed this point beforehand. They had jointly decided that they would not rush into a relationship, that they were happy as they were now. The message, however, told a different story. Dave gently replied that he was not ready for such a change. Carrie's response was unpleasant, containing profanity. He described the message saying, "I didn't know what to think. I was shocked." When he returned to the apartment, he found that all of Carrie's belongings she had brought with her were gone. Apparently, that's why he thought the woman had left him. That same day, Carrie deleted him from her Facebook friends. However, that was not the end of it, as Dave started receiving text messages and emails from Carrie several times a day. They contained curses and threats to ruin his life. There were so many of them, and they were all rude. Carrie also didn't show up for work, which was unlike her since she was notable for her punctuality. Strange messages from Carrie were sent not only to Dave Koopa, but also to her mother and her 15-year-old son. She wrote that she had found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max, but for now she wanted to be alone as she was worried about her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie published a lengthy post on her Facebook profile. The post read, I've answered enough questions to prove to everyone that I've had enough. You can either believe that I'm the daughter, mother, sister, and friend you've known your whole life, or you can just leave me alone. I left of my own free will, and I'm sick of everyone giving me a hard time for doing what I had to do. I don't miss it. I just don't want to go home right now. I'm a grown woman, and if I feel like leaving home, I have the right to do so. So when I'm ready to come home, I will. I'm sorry that after hurting everyone, I just up and left. Time passed, but Carrie never arrived. The woman's mother realized something was wrong when Carrie missed her own birthday, as well as Max's birthday and other family celebrations. The final straw was her father's funeral. After a while, Liz Guler also started receiving messages from Carrie. In these messages, Carrie insulted and humiliated the woman, and some messages contained a threat to stay away from Dave. To understand this strange behavior from her friend, Liz decided to contact him. He told her that he was in a similar situation. Carrie attacked him with messages and emails, accusing her former lover of all wrongdoings, calling him a liar, and promising revenge for all the pain she claimed he had caused her. Sometimes the messages were ominous in nature, telling her what Dave was up to at the moment. The fact that they were in the same position brought Dave and Liz even closer together. He felt even more guilty for the inconvenience he had caused her. Soon, the incessant messages from Carrie became more threatening. The text was illogical and full of grammatical errors. Carrie's mother insisted that her daughter had never been an angry person and that she had always written letters and other documents correctly. Carrie was meticulous about spelling and style. Carrie's bipolar disorder may have worsened after a second trigger. She could have experienced even more severe mental abnormalities. There is no other explanation for Carrie's actions besides her uncontrolled mental state. The primary indicator of dissociative identity disorder, or split personality, is the presence of distinct self-awareness in each ego. Each of these identities has its own memories, thought processes, behaviors, and even tendencies towards certain actions. Could this explain Carrie's strange behavior and even her altered writing style? Everything pointed to the woman's instability. That's why the police didn't consider Carrie missing, focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie through her cell phone, but it was all in vain. The signals were being blocked. Liz and Dave were still receiving hundreds of texts and emails. Sometimes, even when they were together, their phones would receive nasty messages at the same time. The couple continued to date, but Dave felt uncomfortable around Liz. She became more demanding, although she continued to claim that she was fine with their no-commitment relationship. Every time Dave had a fight with Liz and ended his relationship with her, Carrie increasingly texted, "We were both victimized. Dave and I had something in common that we didn't have with anyone else," says Liz. Common problems brought the young people closer together, and they returned to each other again and again. In January 2013, Dave discovered the missing Carrie's car in his front yard. Surprisingly, the fingerprints on the steering wheel did not belong to Carrie, and in general, the car was clean. No suspicious traces were found in it. The police later turned the car over to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to write to Liz and Dave. She started sending pictures of their children and threatened to harm them if Dave didn't stop seeing Liz. Time passed, but nothing changed. Carrie's obsessive stalking continued, and Liz annoyed Dave more and more with her jealousy as he continued to socialize with other women. He grew tired of the situation and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. After another tragedy occurred in August 2013, Liz Gore reported a fire in her home that killed all of her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz told police she suspected Carrie was responsible for what happened, as the woman had threatened her repeatedly in her texts and emails. The incident marked a turning point in the case of the missing Carrie. Carrie was put on a federal wanted list, and each of the tens of thousands of messages was decided to be studied in detail. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed he was endangered too, so he bought a gun for protection. There was a reason for that, as someone vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked, and threw a brick through his window. Carrie seemed to direct her anger at anyone in Dave's life. After a while, the mother of his children, Amy Flora, also began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. Since the man often spent time with his children, he often saw Amy as well. Police became suspicious, as it didn't make any sense why a woman who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks for 3 years now would stalk him and his ex-girlfriends. Carrie's relatives were also relentless in searching for the missing woman, plugging in every way they could to find her. And one day in the spring of 2015, the efforts paid off. Detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty volunteered to solve Carrie's disappearance, and they found no evidence that Carrie was alive. As one of them told ABC News, "It's not normal for adults to just pick up and leave without literally spending any money, and no one saw her and no one heard her voice. It just doesn't make sense, as she had a good income and a nice house." With the help of Anthony Kawa, the digital forensics administrator for the Palm County Sheriff's Office, detectives reviewed content downloaded from Krupp and Gore's phones in 2013. Kawa stated that Carrie sent more than 50,000 text messages and 15,000 emails to Dave over a 3-year period. Kawa further added that the person impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated in their methods, attempting to conceal their IP address and true identity. It was clear that the perpetrator had significant technological expertise and access to computer programs. In December 2015, Liz Gore contacted the police again, reporting that she had been shot in the leg on the doorstep of her own home. According to her, it was not Carrie, but Amy Flora, whom she recognized as her attacker. Dave was also missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. Could this woman be behind Carrie's disappearance? There was a lead in the investigation that explained why everyone connected to Dave Krupp was being harassed. It could well be that Amy, having failed to settle her personal life after the breakup with the father of her children, decided to take revenge in this way and eliminate all competitors, especially since the relationship between Dave and Amy has always been not bad, and the joint children brought them closer together, while foreign women clearly prevented them from getting back together. It didn't take long for the police to respond. Amy was questioned, but to everyone's surprise, she had an alibi. She had not been at Liz's house at the time of the shooting, which was confirmed by several people. So no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly confusing, but at the same time, new details emerged from the specialists who were processing data from Liz's cell phone. Gore's phone contained a wealth of information. Kava discovered fake email addresses with different variations of Carrie's name, and investigators also found an app she used to schedule messages to be sent at certain times. This could explain how she and Dave were receiving messages from Carrie simultaneously. Kava became suspicious of Liz Guler, and the puzzle came together when Liz's fingerprint were compared to those found on the steering wheel of Carrie's car. They were a perfect match. It became obvious who the culprit was. The killer had been around all these years, and there was no telling who else might have been affected by her actions. One thing was clear: the case had to be stopped as soon as possible. The only thing left to do was not to scare Liz away, or, better yet, catch her red-handed. Something had to be done to throw the woman off balance. The detectives decided to make up a story about supposedly believing Liz, with Amy still being the prime suspect. Liz took the bait. She was overjoyed that she would finally be able to get rid of another rival that was interfering with her happiness with Dave. Shortly afterward, Liz Guler handed the police an email that she claimed was from Amy. In that email, Amy admitted to kidnapping Carrie. It also contained details of the crime. The confession stated that Carrie had been stabbed earlier in the stomach or chest area, and then her body had been disposed of. The details from the letter also contained information about Carrie's car and home, which were not made public. The details were chilling because they were graphic. An investigative spokeswoman said Liz provided detectives with the kind of information that only a true criminal could possess. Thus, she inadvertently confessed to the murder of Carrie. It was clear from the letter that the crime had taken place in the car. Therefore, it was decided to examine the victim's car once again. After the specialists removed the seat covers and fabric, a blood stain belonging to the missing Carrie was found. How did Liz manage to poison messages on Carrie's behalf and yet remain above suspicion? Some sources claim that Liz Gore led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. The latter lived at an IP address that was identified as the starting point of messages sent from Carrie's name. Through communicating with him, it was revealed that he had been dating Shanana Gore, whom many knew as Liz, for a long time. Out of kindness, the man offered Shanana to move in with his children after the fire. However, the relationship between the two was complicated and deteriorated markedly after they began living together. Garrett would look after Gore's children while she secluded herself in her room or went somewhere else. It came as a big revelation to the man what the police told him. Gore spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be the missing woman. Her room was a mess, but no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did find several cell phones and electronics in the last apartment she occupied in late December 2016. Shanana Gore was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutors spoke about the complexity of the court investigation. Most murders are dark, but this crime was bizarre to the point where it would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Shanana Gore's attorney, James Martin Davis, hoped the case would fall apart because it relied mostly on circumstantial evidence. Carrie's body was never found, nor was the crime weapon, and Gore herself never confessed. There was no evidence that Carrie had died at all. The defense team opted for a mistrial, meaning that the degree of Shauna's guilt would be determined by a judge, not a jury. Mountains of complex electronic evidence were presented along with physical evidence. However, the prosecution insisted that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car was consistent with a confession of stabbing from the IP address where Shanana lived. Investigators did establish Shauna's direct link to Carrie's murder by analyzing the memory card she was using around the time Carrie went missing. It was in a tablet that was stored in Dave's possession. Deleted images were recovered, including a photo of a human foot with a Chinese symbol tattooed on it. It was immediately obvious that the foot belonged to a man who had been dead for many years. In addition, among Carrie's special features was a similar tattoo. Later, the woman's mother confirmed that the tattoo really belonged to her daughter. The photo confirmed Shanana Gore's conviction. The judge found her guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He said Carrie did not disappear voluntarily. It is very unfortunate that she was murdered. Authorities believe Shanana killed Carrie, gave her body time to decompose, and then burned the remains to get rid of all evidence. Probably overstepping her bounds due to jealousy, she decided to get rid of her rival. After disposing of her, she purposely took her cell phone to make her look crazy and win back Dave's favor. When her plan succeeded, Shanana wanted to rid her lover of Amy as well. But she got so caught up in the game that she ended up falling into a trap of her own making. It's a bloody love square, to say the least. Gore was also found guilty of setting fire to her own home in August 2013, which she tried so hard to blame on Carrie. The fire not only burned down the house but also killed pets. She received an additional 20 years in prison. The woman is currently incarcerated at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. Shanana still maintains her innocence. Dave admitted that he has received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he never noticed her stalking him when they were together, which cannot be said for Shanana. He also added, "I want her to leave and not do this to anyone else. Justice has been served." For a long time, Carrie's name was on everyone's lips. She was innocently accused of stalking people, as well as burning Shanana's house down. Now Carrie herself has been recognized as a victim, and her good name has been restored. Carrie's mother wanted her daughter to be remembered as the fun, smart, talented woman she was. So what became of Carrie's son, Maxwell Carey of Macedonia? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps by becoming a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science and got married. It's unlikely he was able to forget what happened, but he may have found peace in the family he created. Because of his past, Dave Koopa has now chosen to live away from the public eye. In fact, he doesn't even have a public account on any social media platform. The chilling crime story is a brutal reminder of the intricate complexities that can arise in human relationships. Manipulation can sometimes go to extreme lengths just to maintain control of a situation. It is a story about how vulnerable we can be in our familiar surroundings without knowing the true nature of the people around us. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Tibor was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, as the second child to his parents and had a younger sister. He had a strong affinity for socializing and was musically inclined, able to play almost any instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He taught his sister Isabella how to play the piano, and they would often sing and play together while their parents listened in. After the sudden loss of his father in 2007, Tibor, his sister Isabella, and their mother Rosalia struggled to cope. Tibor spent most of his free time with his sister and began working full-time at the age of 15 in 2008. He applied to the University of Budapest, hoping that obtaining a college degree would lead to a decent job and better financial support for his mother. Despite his exceptional talent, he was denied admission to the university. This led Tibor to discuss moving to Great Britain with his mother, who seemingly supported the idea. Tibor subsequently moved to the United Kingdom in July 2010, at the age of 19. He settled in London and began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Tibor thoroughly enjoyed his job, his responsibilities, his co-workers, and the new clients he met daily. Alice was a talented musician who quickly formed a strong bond with Tibor, as they always found something to discuss. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass worked as receptionists at the hotel, alongside Attila, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest and had been recognized as the best employee of 2010. Like Tibor, Attila was from Hungary, which had brought them closer together. The hotel provided apartments for its incoming employees, and Attila and Tibor took advantage of this convenient arrangement, living in a house behind the hotel. This saved them money and reduced their commute time. Although Tibor was happy to be in England, he didn't give up on his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was finally accepted. Overjoyed, he was set to return to Hungary in August 2011. To mark Tibor's departure, the hotel employees organized a small farewell party on August 9, 2011. The gathering was attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel staff. The next day, the trio was scheduled to work, but all three failed to show up. When they didn't arrive by 7 a.m., their colleagues became concerned and alerted the authorities. The police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the officers found the door unlocked, but there was no response when they knocked. When one of the officers entered, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face concealed by a pillow. A subsequent autopsy revealed 22 stab wounds on her body. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body lay on the bed, having succumbed to 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police cordoned off the house, and investigators and forensic experts launched their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they noticed that the bed where Tibor's body lay was not where he had died. The bed was too clean, suggesting that the perpetrator had inflicted Tibor's fatal wounds elsewhere, then stripped him, cleaned him up, and placed him on the bed. The apartment yielded evidence of a party, including alcohol bottles and illegal substances. Despite a thorough search of the house, surrounding area, and attic, police were unable to find Attila Ban, but they did find his personal belongings, including his papers, still in the apartment. Attila became the prime suspect, and as experts continued to process the crime scene, investigators began interviewing his co-workers. They learned that Attila had taken Tibor under his wing as soon as Tibor started working at the hotel, given their shared nationality. Attila soon invited Tibor to move in with him in an apartment near the hotel, and even adjusted their work schedules so they would be on the same shift. Tibor, a young and attractive man, had plenty of female admirers. However, Attila Ban, who openly identified as gay, had developed romantic feelings for Tibor. According to hotel staff, Tibor consistently rebuffed Attila's advances, leaving Attila unhappy. 3 weeks prior to her murder, Alice started working at the hotel, and Tibor began to show interest in her. This naturally upset Attila, who was jealous despite knowing that Tibor only dated women. The investigators wondered, could Attila's jealousy and unrequited love have driven him to commit the crime? Even before the police discovered the bodies of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams, Attila Ban had posted an ominous message on his Facebook page. The message, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare," was posted at 6:23 a.m., prompting concerned comments from friends that went unanswered. This message further implicated Attila Ban in the murders of his colleagues. The brutality of the crime scene also pointed to Attila's involvement. Alice suffered 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed twice. Additionally, Alice was found lying on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor's body was on the bed. The investigators spoke with the other party members, who revealed that when everyone else departed, Attila, Tibor, and Alice were the only ones remaining in the apartment. This suggested that a significant event had occurred involving these three individuals in the time leading up to dawn. The news of Tibor and Alice's deaths was devastating to both the Adams and Vass families. In a statement, Alice's mother, Sarah, paid tribute to her daughter, saying, "Her loss is a tragedy beyond expression." Alice's mother told the investigators that Alice had sent a text message around midnight saying she would be staying overnight at a friend's house. The police then issued an all-points bulletin for Attila, but he appeared to have vanished without leaving any clues. They tried to track his phone and found that it was connected to cell towers near the hotel, which was strange. It was later discovered that Attila had been much closer to them than anyone had suspected the whole time. The investigation team spent 2 days at the scene before leaving the house. A few hours later, the forensic team returned to the house to conduct further tests. Upon arrival, they noticed that the door they had left open was now locked from the inside. When they entered the room, they found Attila lying on the bed, intoxicated and having attempted to harm himself with scissors and a knife. He had visible wounds on his neck and wrists. When questioned, Attila behaved strangely, using gestures to try to convey something. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors ensured that his life was not in danger. The police were baffled by Attila's whereabouts during the past 2 days, only to discover that he had been hiding in the sofa bed where Tibor Voss's body was found. Attila had created a slit in the base of the sofa, taken a phone and several bottles of water, and climbed inside while the police were investigating the scene. From his hiding spot, he was able to listen and watch the police through the holes he had made. Attila was eventually arrested at the hospital and became the prime suspect. The trial began on July 9, 2012, and as it progressed, more details about the brutal crime emerged. It was revealed that the party had spiraled out of control after Alice, Tibor, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. During the trial, it was established that there was sexual activity between all three, as evidenced by DNA from both men found on Miss Adams' breasts. Attila claimed to remember the three of them being in bed together, but he had no recollection of what happened afterwards. He claimed that he didn't realize the gravity of his actions until the next morning, when he woke up to find Alice and Tibor's lifeless bodies. Overcome with guilt, he wanted to take his own life, but he was too afraid to do it alone. Instead, he cut off Tibor's clothes and climbed into the bathtub with him, unable to bring himself to harm himself. He later moved Tibor's body to the bed, and, aware that people would be looking for them, hid inside the base of the bed. While in hiding, he even managed to update his Facebook page. The defendant broke down in tears in the courtroom as prosecutor Richard Whittam presented the facts of the case to the jury. Tibor Vass had previously been in relationships with women who worked at the hotel, and there is no evidence to suggest he had a romantic relationship with Attila. However, Attila seemed to have strong feelings for Tibor and had exhibited possessive behavior towards him. The court was told that Attila was jealous of Vass and, just days before the crime, had thrown a tantrum during a team-building exercise when he wasn't included in a photo with his victim. The situation escalated to a critical point when Attila discovered that Tibor Vass had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and was planning to leave Britain by the end of the month. This news might have been the trigger that pushed Attila over the edge, as he couldn't bear the sight of Tibor and Alice kissing, and in a fit of jealousy, he killed them both. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in his court statement that Attila was found naked on the single bed, with wounds on his wrists, forearm, and neck. It became clear that he had been hiding in the base of the double bed's divan, and he must have remained there undetected throughout the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene investigation by forensic experts. Despite being in a state of turmoil, Attila had the presence of mind to conceal himself effectively and avoid detection during the entire time the authorities were present at the scene. After the case, Detective Inspector John Finch addressed the media outside the courtroom, defending the police's decision not to search under the bed. "I have reviewed this case multiple times with senior management," he said. "It's unbelievable that someone would hide under a bed. It's such an unusual and bizarre behavior." Finch explained that crime scene examiners would compromise crucial forensic evidence if they routinely lifted up beds to look for people who were not likely to be there. On August 11th, Rosalia received the devastating news that her 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice had been murdered. It was unthinkable and heart-wrenching to accept that such a tragedy could occur. Rosalia had previously taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a reliable and trustworthy friend in London who was mature, friendly, and intelligent. This friend had personally promised Rosalia that he would look out for her son and ensure his safety. Rosalia had trusted him implicitly and regarded him as a member of her own family. This made the news of Tibor's murder all the more crushing. Throughout the police investigation and trial, Rosalia was forced to relive the horrors of that fateful night, which only intensified her grief. The agony and loss that the family has had to endure for the rest of their lives is indescribable. Attila Bond, whose name is actually Attila Bond, pleaded guilty to a crime but claimed he had no memory of the horrific events that occurred on July 18, 2012. After deliberating for only 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict on August 17th, finding the 32-year-old guilty. As a result, he was given 2 life sentences and will be required to serve at least 26 years in prison before becoming eligible to request parole. In the summer of 2003, the body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne was found in a field near Tremont, Illinois. Sabrina was a black female who was known to support a drug habit with prostitution. Sabrina had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The original autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leaving some of the detectives to believe she overdosed. One detective, however, felt uneasy about that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies were found in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the next year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was found partially clothed and lying face down in the snow. She had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy showed that she had multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology showed that she had fatal levels of cocaine in her blood. At this point, police were not ready to call this a murder or entertain the idea of a serial killer preying on black drug-addicted prostitutes. In October of 2004, 32-year-old Shakanda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Shakanda was known to disappear at times, but when she didn't come back after several weeks, her family reported her missing. Shirley and Trapp was also reported missing in the late summer of 2004. She was seen 3 days before she was reported missing. Tamara Walls was reported missing in September of 2004 after not being seen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females known to support a crack cocaine habit with prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and woman. Her longtime partner searched for her but only was able to determine she had been with a man named Larry. Her boyfriend, and father to her 7 daughters and 1 son, describes Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura seemed to struggle with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was found nude along the side of the road. Linda, like the other women, was known to be part of the drug scene in Peoria. At this point, police had determined there was likely a serial killer stalking black females in the Peoria area. A task force was formed, which one detective states would have occurred much quicker if the victims had been white females. While police desperately searched for the killer, they kept a close eye on women in the community at risk. Despite their efforts, on October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for their mother's safety, as she had known many of the women who had been killed or disappeared from central Illinois. Brenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved difficult to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the lead they were waiting for in December of 2004. 35-year-old Vicki Bomer was arrested for theft. From jail, she told authorities that she thought she could help them find the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. She believed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Bomer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home where they shared alcohol and drugs. Once she was intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Bomer was able to escape. Police were at first skeptical, as Bomer asked for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. Why hadn't she reported this back in July? Why wait until she was under arrest? Vicki Bomer claimed she was scared of being arrested for outstanding warrants, which is why she did not come forward in July 2004. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, so detectives decided to take a look at the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois, on July 8, 1966. He served a 2-year stint in prison at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to Larry's family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. Larry became more angry and violent and began using drugs. Larry had an injury, which started an addiction to prescription opioids and later crack cocaine. He also developed an addiction to pornography, preferring videos with black women. Larry lived with his mother in a tiny guest house behind her home. Larry enjoyed gardening, creating a beautiful garden bed of flowers for his mother. When the police arrived at Larry's home following the tip, they noticed the beautiful flowers in the garden. Larry was placed under arrest for the unlawful restraint of Vicki. They questioned Larry about the murders, but he denied having any information about the murdered and missing women. Throughout the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to take one of the cigarette butts and test it for DNA, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. Larry declined to give DNA voluntarily. Police searched Larry Bright's home on January 20, 2005. The investigators dug up the garden, finding several small bone fragments and ashes that were later determined to be human. When the police questioned Larry again, they told him they were digging up his mother's flowers. At this point, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders. He even led investigators to the remains of some of his victims. Larry explained that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sabrina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to his home, which he shared with his mother. He claimed the two drank and used cocaine before having consensual sex. Larry said he did not intend to kill Sabrina, but he became enraged, thinking Sabrina was trying to rip him off. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was found. Larry confessed to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004. Again, he used drugs and alcohol with his victim. He stated that he once again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara. He claimed he caught Barbara stealing from him. He dumped her body along the road, where she was found the next day. The prosecution believed that after the first two murders, Larry developed a bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, he said, "I knew them I would kill the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lauer. He burned her body in his backyard burn pit, burying their remains in his mother's yard. He said he wanted to destroy the bodies to avoid getting caught. He confessed to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains. Her jawbone was found in the backyard. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley in trap. Shakonda Thomas had the same fate after being picked up by Larry Bright. He burned the woman and buried the ashes in the yard. Because of his attempts to cremate his victims, he was nicknamed the Bone Crusher. Larry said that he attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenna Irving as well, but the attempts were unsuccessful due to the weather. He dumped both women along the side of the road. Larry was facing the death penalty following his January 2005 arrest. In an attempt to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid the death penalty, Larry Bright pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide on May 30, 2006. Bright's murders were not considered racially motivated, but detectives believe he was just attracted to black women. He is one of the very few serial killers who chooses victims outside of his race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole, to be served concurrently. He was also given an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea deal, Larry will be required to serve 100% of his sentence with no parole consideration. Larry is currently housed at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that brings little peace to the families of his victims. The loved ones of Larry's victims want people to know that the women he killed were more than just drug addicts or prostitutes. They were people. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. The serial killer dentist of St. Louis, Clennon Engelman. Dr. Clennon Engelman was born on February 6, 1927, in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Engelman grew up on the south side of the city and felt a deep connection to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Dr. Engelman used his GI Bill to go to Washington University and become a dentist. He opened his dental office on the south side of St. Louis, serving the community he had always loved. Dr. Engelman, who went by Clan, was married to a woman named Edna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956. By 1958, both Clan and Ruth had remarried. Clan was operating his dental office and appeared to be successfully serving the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloodied man stumbling. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon passed from his injuries. These injuries were caused by a gunshot. No one could figure out why someone would shoot 28-year-old James Bullock. James Bullock was born on April 17, 1931, in DeSoto. He was raised in Shiloh, Illinois, by his grandparents and later his aunt after his parents passed away. According to an article from 1938, the then 7-year-old was living with his grandparents in 1938 and enjoyed attending school and fishing. James later served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and go to college. Back in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Clenn Engelman. The two married, and 6 short months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed James was there 4 days before his murder, asking to be admitted because he feared for his life. His wife and aunt said this was not true, as the 3 had dinner together on that night. According to his widow and aunt, James was not afraid for his life, and they knew no one who would want him dead. However, Edna Ruth benefited greatly from her husband's death. Ruth had life insurance policies totaling $64,088. While under questioning, Edna Ruth made several weird statements, including telling the police she was married before, but her husband did not know. Who was she married to? Her husband's dentist, Dr. Glenn Engelman. Edna Ruth had lied to James and his family and lied on the marriage application about being married before. Police questioned a local career criminal who was out on parole for an assault at the time of the shooting. They weren't able to tie him to the murder of James, but they did note he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth both refused to take a polygraph test and denied any involvement in the murder of James Bullock. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, refused to be questioned by the police. A patient provided an alibi for Dr. Engelman. However, another witness said that they tried to find someone at the office around the time and the office was empty. Edna Ruth invested part of the funds she received after becoming a widow into doctor. Been bored being a dentist, so he often ventured into other areas of business. This included buying a trike strip along with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had grown to be close friends with Eric and his wife Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the trike strip using dynamite to explode and then fill abandoned cisterns on the property. Eric was lying on his stomach near one of the cisterns when the dynamite exploded quicker than anticipated. Eric was killed instantly and found lying in the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Mr. Frey's wife had an insurance policy on her husband, which she invested part of into Dr. Engelman's practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Ida and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple shared a son, but Ruth hated the close relationship her husband had with a young woman who worked in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman offered to train Carmen to be a dental assistant in his office. Edna felt uncomfortable with the flirting between the doctor and his young assistant. Dr. Engelman, however, claimed he was trying to help people in his community. He hired Carmen's brother, Nick, as well at one point. Ruth was relieved when Carmen met a married man named Peter Holm. Just a few months later, however, Carmen and Eric were walking in a rural area in Pacific, Missouri. The couple were exploring an area known to have caves and scenic paths. A shot suddenly fired, hitting Peter in the head. Peter died instantly, and a hysterically Carmen flagged down the help. Nearby, police found an X on a tree made with tape. The area was familiar to locals as a hunting area, and police believed that the shot was accidental. Police believe someone was target shooting at the X and accidentally struck Mr. Holm. Carmen had a significant amount of life insurance on her husband, totaling $60,000. This is equivalent to around $300,000 in 2024. Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced soon after, at which time Dr. Engelman married young Carmen, whom he had known since she was a small child. His son lived with Edna, his ex-wife. Despite being married to Carmen, Dr. Engelman and Ruth still met regularly for sex. Dr. Engelman constantly had extramarital affairs, which included previous affairs with Carmen, Ruth, and even Sandy Fry, the wife of his business associate Eric Fry, who was killed by dynamite. Another of Dr. Engelman's affairs was with a patient named Barbara Boyle. On November 3, 1977, someone pretending to be from the farm girl walked up to the farmhouse owned by Arthur and Vernita Guswell in Everettsville, Illinois. Soon after entering the home, the elderly couple were attacked and both were shot in the head. The wealthy couple left $340,000 to their son, Ronald Guswell. Guess who Ronald Guswell was married to? Barbara Boyle. On April 4, 1979, less than 2 years after the murder of his parents, Ronald Guswell was found dead inside his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois. The man had been beaten and shot to death. He had been missing for 4 days when his body was found. Following her husband's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance in addition to several life insurance policies. The equivalent sum of money today would be nearly $1.7 million. Guess who she cut to? Dr. Glenn Engelman. Following the murder of Ronald Guswell, authorities were starting to notice the trend of connected deaths to Dr. Engelman. His patients and community, however, only saw a generous man committed to helping his community and its citizens. Dr. Engelman was not the greatest dentist, however. He often did a sloppy job of making casts for dentures and dental appliances, requiring the work to have to be redone by the dental lab several times. His business was struggling, however, and he soon found himself in debt with the dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera. Sophie Barrera owned a South St. Louis dental laboratory and had grown tired of waiting for Dr. Engelman to pay up by 1980. She filed a lawsuit against the doctor that was set to go to court just a few days after Sophie was murdered. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis. Shortly after, the vehicle exploded. Police found remnants of a bomb under her charred vehicle. Sophie had told her son before she was in fear of being killed. She believed Dr. Glenn Engelman was dangerous. Dr. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released. Police were certain he was responsible for Sophie's death, but they had to prove it. The public also wondered if the bombing was related to another bombing in the area that was carried out between two mob families fighting for control over St. Louis's labor unions. The evidence indicated, however, that this was not a mob hit. The number one suspect was the man who owed Sophie $15,000. Dr. Engelman had to be stopped, but the police weren't sure how to do it. Detectives soon began having conversations with Dr. Engelman's ex-wife and mother of his son, Ruth. Ruth told police nothing at first, but eventually started to talk. She explained that Dr. Engelman often bragged about killing people. He told her that he had a superpower. He was able to kill without remorse. He had admitted to killing Eric Fry, Peter Holm, and the Coswell family. It was his side hustle, killing for profit. Ruth agreed to help the police, but none of her testimony could be used in court because Dr. Engelman confessed to her while the two were still married. He was protected by spousal privilege. Ruth decided to wear a wire, however, and met up with Dr. Engelman to exchange their son and sometimes just to socialize. They were still having a sexual relationship despite Dr. Engelman's marriage to Carmen. She tried to get Dr. Engelman to confess to her again by asking direct questions. He didn't seem to take the bait at first, and Ruth feared he would kill her next. Ruth suggested police plant a bug in her bedroom and she would invite the dentist over for sex. Dr. Engelman was suspicious, however, and did not say anything that could lead to his arrest. Ruth then met him at a diner wearing a wire, and this time he commented on being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims. He admitted to the murders in great detail, providing just what police needed for an arrest. He explained that he found murder more sexually satisfying than sex. His ex-wife was given a new life in the Witness Protection Program. Carmen, who was no longer married to the dentist, and her brother Nick were brought in for questioning to corroborate the allegations against Dr. Engelman. As possible co-conspirators, they asked for and were granted immunity to testify against the dentist. Carmen told quite the story. She said she was working for the dentist when he suggested she find someone with good benefits to marry. He told her about Eric Fry, whom he said he directed Sandy Fry to marry with all intentions of murdering the insurance proceeds. Soon after she was married, Carmen said Dr. Engelman told her where to go and made sure her husband was shot and killed. He staged it to look like a target shooting accident. Glenn Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at Dr. Engelman's first trial, for which he was convicted of murdering Peter Holm and given 50 years in prison. The dentist then pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving a life sentence for that murder in Missouri, Dr. Engelman was back in clerk by 1985 in Illinois. In 1984, Robert Handy, a contact and acquaintance of Dr. Engelman, admitted to authorities that he had taken part in the murder conspiracy of the Coswell family. He implicated Dr. Engelman, who had bludgeoned Ronald Coswell and shot him, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Boyle. Dr. Engelman was given 3 life sentences for the Coswell murders. He also was convicted of federal mail fraud and given a 30-year federal sentence. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to kill her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged in the case due to lack of evidence. Barbara Boyle went on trial for the murder of her in-laws, Arthur and Vernita Coswell, and husband Ronald in 1985. The jury acquitted her of the murders of Arthur and Vernita but convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Ronald Coswell. Barbara Boyle was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 1985. She was granted parole in 2009. Dr. Engelman enjoyed his notoriety in Missouri, often comparing himself to legendary outlaw Jesse James. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, but the actual number is unknown. Unlike other serial killers, Dr. Engelman was inspired, at least in part, by greed. He also seemed to revel in his ability to not feel remorse. Dr. Engelman died of diabetes-related health issues in 1999 at age 72. He was incarcerated in Jefferson City at the time,